I'll introduce today a system of therapy I have developed. Uh, I call it HEAT. The acronym stands for Holistic Elemental Analysis and Therapy. And I'll introduce this system in a concise way by taking example of schizophrenia, delusion of persecution. I'm sure after this session, many research ideas will come.
Exciting. Thank you.
So the first question is, why this system? What is the need for this system? And the need for this system stems from the ideal of psychotherapy. If we ask ourselves, what is the ideal of psychotherapy? And are the psychotherapy schools where they ought to be? And obvious answer is no, we have a long way to go. So the ideal of psychotherapy in operational terms goes into three fundamental ideas. The first fundamental idea is the idea of synthesis. The second fundamental idea is idea of elemental analysis. And the third fundamental idea is to create a holistic healing system. And any school that does all of this should also satisfy the fourth fundamental idea of being a complete school which has all these five. We have talked before about a complete school of therapy, a three-quarter school of therapy, a half school of therapy, and a quarter school of therapy. So we said then that if a school has philosophy, metapsychology, concepts, and technique, it becomes a full school. But most schools actually are process-driven. Sorry, instead of metapsychology, it should be model of the mind. So when we are talking about schools of psychotherapy, we said if a school has philosophy, model of the mind, if any school has philosophy, model of the mind, concepts, and technique, it becomes a full school. But most schools, they don't have philosophy or model of the mind. Freud, Jung, and Lacan, they were the only ones who actually gave a full model of the mind. Otherwise, most schools only have concepts and technique. So I would call those schools as half schools. If you have model of the mind, you become three-quarter schools. And if you have a philosophy, you become a full school. So we don't find any full school in psychotherapy. Most have actually avoided getting into philosophy or spirituality of any kind. So as I was saying, the need for heat is based upon these five ideas. Idea one is the idea of synthesis. Idea two, idea of elemental analysis. Idea three, creating a holistic healing system. And idea four, the creation of a full school. All this had to be addressed, and there was no school which was doing this And that was the reason a new school was needed. And that is what I have tried to do in this GATE model. So let us look at the 4 ideas one by one. The first idea, the idea of synthesis. Synthesis at various levels. The first ideal people have is synthesizing schools of Freud, Klein, Jung, and so on, synthesis within psychoanalysis. Because at present you have schools which are parallel, often opposing each other, at times overlapping each other, at times crossing each other, agreeing with each other. So we are not been able to do a synthesis of any time in a deeper sense between schools of psychoanalysis. So the first synthesis is the synthesis of schools within psychoanalysis. Second synthesis is schools in Western psychotherapy. So there is psychoanalytic schools, a bunch of schools, and schools outside of psychoanalysis like CBT, logotherapy, REBT, existential humanistic therapy, and so on. So all of them are in the Western psychotherapy model, but still independent. There is no deeper effort at synthesis. Second part of synthesis is that. Third meaning of the word synthesis is synthesis between East and West. So let us say you have been able to do some synthesis in psychoanalysis, and then between psychoanalysis and non-psychoanalytic schools, then the third comes is East and West. All these Western schools put together and the Eastern schools put together. So third will actually be within the East, and the fourth will be East and West. So this is the whole idea of synthesis. Now to do this, a very different kind of framework is required. We can ask this question that in the present context, why this synthesis is not proceeding? And this synthesis is not proceeding because the framework of each school is not elemental enough and broad enough to include other schools. So unless we have a framework which is broad enough, elemental enough, and modular enough, we will not be able to integrate them, because we require an overarching framework in which these schools or parts of each school can fit in a modular way. So that framework is not there, and therefore the synthesis is in a state of stalemate. There is no progress. So this is the first idea of synthesis. The second idea is of creating a system of elementals. Like if you can explain the entire millions of colors in the world by 3 elemental colors. Similarly, is it possible in psychotherapy or psychology to have a few elemental concepts? So like in the case of colors, can we have a few elemental concepts? Like in Ayurveda, you have 3 fundamental concepts: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And everything else gets explained in these 3 concepts. So this is like creating a system of elementals, that in 3 elementals you explain the whole system. If you go into philosophy in Sankhya, you will have a limited number of elementals, like 24 or something. And then everything in the universe is explained in terms of interaction of those 24. Similarly, in Indian philosophy, we have the idea of Panch Mahabhut, that everything else is explained in terms of the 5 elementals. So the idea of a limited number of elementals being used to create a complete theory is not new. In fact, any mature theory always goes to this level, that in any mature theory, we have a few structural elementals and a few functional elementals, and the two put together can be used to describe the whole system. Like this is what the standard model of physics also does, that you have a few structures which may be subatomic structures, and then a few forces. And these few atomic, subatomic structures and these few forces, they become the few atomic structures are the structural elementals, and the fundamental forces are the functional elementals. And the two together can be used to explain everything else. Now, the same kind of thing is attempted here. That can we have a set of structural elementals And can we have a set of functional elementals, and the two together can explain the whole psychological system. So this is creating a structure of system of elementals. So the second thing that HEAT does is, the first what HEAT does is, it offers a framework for synthesis of various schools. Second, what it does is, it takes a few steps towards explaining the psychic system in terms of a few structural and functional elementals. The third thing that HEAT attempts to do is to create a holistic healing system. So in healing, we all know that if we do it long enough, we come to the same principle of practice, that everything works on someone and nothing works on everyone. Which means that we need an individualized basket of tools for each individual. And that is a question for research for the next 25 years. That if you have a given personality which is suffering from a given pathology of a particular intensity, so personality, pathology, intensity, then what school or what healing approach will be appropriate to that person? And this need not be one. We may even start with two. Like somebody may need, say somebody is having bipolar, he may need therapy and psychiatry both. He may not have the option of one. And later on, it may be beneficial to give some form of pranic healing or so homeopathy. And maybe after some time you stop. So how do you sequence the whole thing? How do you bring all that you know, different modalities of healing, into a framework? So this creating a basket of framework based upon personality, pathology, intensity is also one of the objectives, and towards it, the system takes a few steps. Another way is it offers a framework for empirical understanding of the holistic healing tools. And obviously, this kind of work is beyond the capability of any individual to do. I can only create a framework to start off with, and then it will undergo compare, contrast, modification, refinement, and all of that. And after some years, it will, with the work of many others probably, it will come to be a more stable, comprehensive, exact system. But one of the most difficult things is to start off this kind of system. And especially one that is a full school, which has philosophy, model of the mind, concepts, and technique. So this is the fundamental of the system. Okay, why this system is needed? Because these goals are very good goals for the next 25 years. And to move on this path towards these goals, we need some framework. And that framework is difficult to create, and I have created that framework.
So, what is the difference between model of the mind and meta psychology?
Model of the mind is more structural, right? Where metapsychology is a non-empirical summary of clinical experience. For example, in Freud's metapsychology, we talk of the death instinct. Now, death instinct is completely a metapsychological concept. It's not a clinical concept or an empirical concept. Like, for example, a person of depression comes and he relishes talking about melancholic things. And there can be two ways of looking at it. One way is that every time he does it, he masters it bit by bit. Small amounts of catharsis is happening, small amount of analytical advance is happening, and thereby he's mastering it bit by bit. That's one way of looking at it.
Yes.
Another way of looking at it is that masochism is at work and he is relishing doing that. Going again and again into melancholic states and having no improvement at all. Then we also look at masochism. Now, Freud says masochism is one of the outcomes of the death instinct. So if a person of depression comes, keeps talking about melancholic things, but does not get well, it just continues as though his talking has just no effect. And when he talks, often there is a gleam in his eyes or a ring of energy in his sound, which means that secretly he might be enjoying it. Now, in that case, we will refer to death instinct. Now, death instinct is a complete psychological concept. What is observed is a person of depression talking about melancholia, not getting well, and talking with a spring in the step kind of situation. This is clinical observation. Now, from this, we deduce that probably masochism is at work, and masochism is the outcome of death instinct. Now, both masochism and death instinct are metapsychological concepts.
Non-clinical summary of
It's a non-empirical summary of clinical observations.
empirical summary of clinical.
And people can differ on this. People can't differ on observations which are objective, but they can always differ on the interpretation of those observations.
Yes.
So that is metapsychology. Now this masochism and death instinct, both are metapsychological concept, but they don't find any mention in Freud's model of the mind. So when Freud talks about the model of the mind, he talks about id, ego, superego, the repression barrier, and the forces of repression. He does not talk about these things. So every metapsychological concept need not find a mention in the model of the mind. Although the components of model of the mind are all metapsychological. Id, ego, superego, all are metapsychological concepts. So concepts which are into the model of the mind are all metapsychological, but all metapsychological concepts don't find a mention in the model of the mind. Is it clear, or some more questions?
Yes, yes sir.
Okay. So these are the goals for next 25 years in the area of psychotherapy, and one needs a system with which to start off moving towards these goals. So HEAT is one system which I have created to take a few steps in this direction. Now, how the HEAT will develop? First will be the conceptual explanation that HEAT will give of all the disorders. Second, internal consistency within the theory. Third, utility in healing. Fourth, development of this theory further along with tool development. Fifth stage will be empirical validation, which will be the fifth stage of theory development. Then once it is empirically validated, whatever part of the theory is validated, that will move to the next stage of standardization, and then perhaps automation and use artificial intelligence. So this is how the development will go, and certain parts will not go to artificial intelligence because that is where a human system has no alternative. For example, containment. For example, approval and validation. Now, this is something which a human being expects from another human being, not from a system. So those parts will remain, but certain parts will go on these predictable lines. Now, how is the HEAT system? It is very much like the normal psychotherapy system, 7-step process: case history, psychological testing, diagnosis, pathogenesis, holistic healing plan, therapy, supervision. The only difference is how this is done is completely different. So let me just go into a practical example and then come to theory, which will be easier. So let us take example of a patient of schizophrenia who has come to us and he is complaining of delusion of persecution. So what would we do in psychoanalysis? The moment we know the patient is of schizophrenia, delusion of persecution, we would start looking at the case history to find out which school is applicable. How each school gives different causality of delusion of persecution. Because each school says something different why it happens. So Freud will say delusion of persecution happens because of repressed homosexuality. Klein will say delusion of persecution happens because of the split being open. ISTDP practitioner will say it happens because of repressed rage, which is thrown outside and then you are terrified of it. And this repressed rage will be maybe because of frustration with primary attachment figures. Jung will say it has to do with overactivation of the predator archetype. That you are seeing predators everywhere who are ready to pounce upon you. Now, which school to use or multiple schools to use depends on the details of the case history. Is the case history pointing towards sexual issues or is it pointing more towards aggressive issues? If it is pointing more towards aggressive issues, is it pointing towards extreme thinking or aggression without extreme thinking? If it is aggression with extreme thinking, the Kleinian explanation is probably more correct. If we are looking at extreme thinking not being predominant and yet there is repressed rage, we might be looking at a more ISTDP type of presentation. And if the dreams tell us that there is a recurrent intrusion of the predator in the dreams or in the delusional utterances of the patient, then we might be looking at a Jungian explanation. But let me, for today's discussion, take a situation where the person who is coming to us gives a case history where homosexuality is a struggle or heterosexuality is a problem, which will allow us to point towards a possible Freudian dynamic in the unconscious as the causal factor. So let us say a patient comes to us, complaint is schizophrenia, specifically delusion of persecution, and the case history is full of heterosexual or homosexual issues. And therefore we decide that let us focus on the Freudian causality first. Now, what have we done? When we looked at the case history, the complaint, and considered all the explanations of different schools, what we are actually doing is holistic school analysis. A multiple school analysis of the case. And then we eliminate certain schools and we remain with the school that seems more promising. Now we can have a complicated case where the person reports different episodes where different episodes are explained by different schools. That the person tells us 2 or 3 different episodes and the case history is such that we may have to use different schools for different episodes. But that's a more complicated case. Today, let us look at a simple case. A person comes with schizophrenia, delusion of persecution. Case history suggests sexual issues, and therefore we look at the Freudian interpretation. So how will we go ahead? What is the Freudian dynamic? We have chosen the Freudian school, and now we will look at the Freudian causal explanation of delusion of persecution. So then what is the Freudian dynamic? The Freudian dynamic is in the unconscious, a homosexual desire has come up. I love you towards person of the same gender. And because it is not acceptable, the superego starts working and it converts to I hate you by using the reaction formation defense. So I love you leads to guilt. The guilt mandates use of reaction formation defense to have I hate you. This, as I love you keeps increasing, I hate you keeps increasing. And after some time it turns to I will kill you. Again the superego comes in, guilt comes in. And again projection is used this time. The defense of projection, I will kill you, is projected onto somebody else, you will kill me. And then there is paranoia that he will kill me. So this is the unconscious Freudian dynamic according to Freud, which is at the root of delusion of persecution. Now, what would normally we do? This is classical psychoanalysis, like till now. Normally, what we will do is we will start going into therapy with the person, knowing that this is something probably we have to center on. That the core of the whole problem is inability to accept one's homosexuality without guilt. That is the core of the whole problem. And we go into therapy, right? And we slowly try to channelize therapy so that this self-acceptance can enhance. And the person is able to fully feel the guilt and let it go. But in this heat process, what we do is we go deeper into this dynamic. We go into analysis of this dynamic also. So we take the next step and we say that if I call this Freudian dynamic at the root of the disorder as the core process. So the name that you give to the unconscious dynamic, the unconscious causal dynamic of a disorder, we call it the core process. Now, what do we do in HEAT? We deconstruct the core process into two parts. The most critical part of the core process and the non-critical part of the core process. For example, if we go into this dynamic, in this whole dynamic, which is the most critical part, if that had not happened, rest of the problem would not have happened. The most critical part is here, I love you turning to I hate you. If this conversion had not happened, rest of the thing would not have happened. So if we look at the core process, what the Freud calls as the core dynamic, if we call that a core process and we further analyze the core process, we will see that the core of the whole problem is here in the translation of I love you to I hate you. And this is happening because of guilt. Inability to accept one's homosexuality and feeling guilty about it. So if we can deconstruct the core process, we can deconstruct it into the most critical part is I love you to I hate you. And that is where after I love you, guilt comes up. And guilt results in first repression, then rage and reaction formation into I hate you. So what is happening? First, automatically what is happening is I love you. This is automatic. Once I love you happens, guilt comes in. It's not acceptable. So then what does guilt do? First, guilt creates rage. That how dare you have this kind of a feeling? This is unacceptable. And second, it brings forth reaction formation to convert it into I hate you. You just can't have it. So first is how dare you have it? Or you can put it the other way. I hate you. Rage first, repression later. But whatever you put it, I love you to I hate you is the critical thing. Yeah, you're saying.
Isn't all guilt Oedipal in nature?
Freud would say yes, but Klein has a different view.
I see.
How different it is?
Mm-hmm.
Freud had a very interesting relationship with guilt, because Freud thought that guilt is something which comes into existence at the resolution of the Oedipal complex. That thou shall and thou shall not, that comes at the end of the Oedipus complex, because according to him, in order to overcome the castration anxiety, one creates this guilt that one ought not to do this. So Freud says guilt is the hair of the Oedipus complex.
Guilt is the
Hair, H-E-I-R, the anointed prince kind of. So then what Freud says is that later on, when we have Oedipal fantasies, the guilt that we have is often retrospectively applied. So once the guilt is created, then even something pre-Oedipal, which was not acceptable to the conscience, the guilt is retrospectively applied to them. And therefore, in some cases, even in pre-Oedipal situation, we find guilt. Because according to Freud, if guilt is coming at the end of Oedipus, then before 5 years of age, when guilt is appearing for the first time, you cannot have guilt for anything. But that is not what we find. We find pre-Oedipal guilt also. So Freud overcame this by saying it was retrospectively applied once having come into existence. So as an adult, when we see guilt operating pre-Oedipal, but in reality, as it happened, it actually happened only post-Oedipal.
repentance, more of repentance.
Correct. So the idea of thou shall not is a coping mechanism to move away or extricate oneself from the castration anxiety.
And identification of with the norms,
Correct.
social norms, acceptance of the edicts.
Correct. So Freud says the first time it happens, here the moral aspect of desire comes up, because in the anal stage also there is a power struggle. That the child does not want to get toilet trained and the parents are toilet training him. So there is a power struggle. So there is a limiting of desire. But that limiting of desire is only aggressive and power driven in nature. It is not guilt driven in nature, which is quite strange, because in many OCD situations, we see the anal fixation and huge amount of guilt. So Freud is not exactly correct on this stage, but as he says it, it is this. It is at the end of the Oedipus that the guilt comes into picture and then retrospectively gets added onto the pre-Oedipal events. But Klein has a very different take. Klein says the guilt is inborn, and she talks about the non-Oedipal guilt. And the non-Oedipal guilt is in the split position when the child attacks the breast in its fantasy with all its rage and sadism. And when it comes to know that the good and the bad breast are one, then the guilt arises. And in order to overcome the guilt, the child in its fantasy tries to put together the breast which it had thrown into pieces by attack. And this, Klein says, is the first purposeful act of creativity. And it is also an act of reparation. So Klein says that this happens even in the paranoid schizoid position, even before the 6 months are completed. So for Klein, guilt is inborn, reparation is inborn, And Jung also says the same thing. Jung says that guilt is inborn. He does not use the word guilt, he uses the word moral complex. And he says the moral complex is inborn. So that is how the two are different, and that is how the non-Oedipal part of guilt also operates. It can be a purely aggressive pre-Oedipal aggressive phenomena which can evoke guilt. Destruction can evoke guilt. Attack can evoke guilt. Envy can evoke guilt.
For example, after the Great War,
Ha,
the Emperor Ashoka felt guilty.
ha.
And what will we call that guilt? Is it pre-Oedipal or is it Oedipal?
Both.
Uh-huh.
The killing of so many soldiers is pre-Oedipal.
Uh-huh.
But the killing of the other king can be taught to be Oedipal.
I see. Hmm.
Right? But it's primarily pre-Oedipal. And that is like something inborn, that when you do destruction and you know it's not for the right reason, that non-right destruction always evokes guilt. And I always use a statement to say, in the realm of the psyche, I use this statement. I say, we are far more than we believe.
Yeah.
And that works either ways. We are far more immoral than we believe, and we are far more moral than we believe. In many cases, the guilt is absolute in the unconscious. The conscious may have 10 reasons to justify an act, and it might be justified rationally. But the unconscious still may produce guilt. I can give two examples. Let us say you are working in an organization and somebody reporting to you just does not work. And you do everything possible.
How do you know?
Huh?
I was joking. I said, this is very intuitive. How do you know?
Right. But
Yes, sir.
let us say in more measurement oriented things, you can make it out.
Hmm.
Like somebody has to produce X number of products on the manufacturing line or sell X volume of products in a month. So those are more quantifiable kind of things. So if somebody is not working and you are very lenient, so you talk to the person, you try to counsel him, you give him a long rope. Right? Despite everything, at the end of 2 years, nothing is happening. And you may have no choice but to fire the person, and you may still feel guilty. Like everything is rational. Anybody in your situation would have done the same thing because there's no other option but that. And yet you may feel guilty. So guilt is far more stronger than we believe. And every wrong that we do is somehow registered inside. In fact, Gurdjieff used to say, if you can laugh with a ringing loud voice, you don't have much guilt.
Who used to say that, sir?
Gurdjieff.
I see. I haven't heard of him. Sorry.
Gurdjieff is a very renowned mystique of
Mhm.
the Middle East.
Okay.
And there's a very famous book on him called The Fourth Way.
The fourth wave. Mhm.
And uh, Gurdjieff is one of those spiritual masters that Osho has quoted perhaps most pervasively,
I see.
because uh, Gurdjieff used to be very creative in terms of
Mhm.
creating tools for self-awareness.
Mm.
And he used everything, drama, music, dance, everything for it. I'll send you a small video of one of the Gurdjieff dances.
Please.
So Gurdjieff used to say that a man who does not have guilt, anything to hide, he can laugh with a loud sound. Because every small thing that you commit, it leads to guilt and anxiety. What will happen if people come to know of it? Is it not shameful that I have done this? There is a constant bite of guilt. And therefore, many people who accumulate a lot of money are not able to laugh loudly. This is what Gurdjieff used to say. The fountain of light and joy from inside is clouded by the clouds of guilt. So the clouds of guilt and the clouds of shame, they cover up the fountain of light and joy which is springing from inside. And that is a price everyone pays without any court sentencing. The sentencing is inside, internal, automatic, natural.
Yes. We use this phrase very often that everybody knows inside where one is making a mistake. Whether you acknowledge it or not, whether other people bring it to the notice of yourself or others or not, you know inside that you have made something wrong.
Yeah, one of my teachers used to use this in a humorous way. He
Uh-huh.
had this habit of falling asleep in the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
And part of it had to do because he would start sessions very early. Because many people who had to go to work, they would come to him either before work or after work.
Yes.
So he would start the sessions at 7 o'clock. So he would get up early. He would have a session 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 2 sessions, and then after 6 o'clock. So he would sleep in the afternoon. So he had this habit. So when he was from Bombay. So whenever he would come to teach us, he would fall asleep in the afternoon. He had that habit. So we would say, okay, you are coming from such a distance and why waste this time? So he would cover it up by saying कि जिसके पेट में पाप नहीं होता है उसको नींद आती है. Right? So he would cover it up, but there was some grain of truth in what he said. In fact, he could have added anxiety to the guilt and also anger to the guilt. That out of all these three reasons, one may not sleep. Anger, guilt, anxiety, and even excitement. Panic, non-sleeping. All the four reasons may lead to lack of sleep. And of course, one can add fifth one, the physical activity. If the whole day you have been in rest, there is no reason to sleep. Okay. So what we do is instead of getting into therapy directly with the dynamic in mind, we deconstruct the dynamic and we divide the dynamic into the critical event and the non-critical event. So this is the core process. This core process I divide into two, the critical event and the non-critical event. What is the critical event? This, I love you to I hate you. This is the critical event. And in that critical event, what is the critical elemental in operation? Guilt. If this is not there, rest of it will not happen. And therefore, you can think about alternatives. Okay, in this case, this has happened, therefore the person has come to you. But imagine somebody has the same thing, but he does not come to you. He's living very healthily. So in this case, what is happening? He is accepting his homosexuality completely. So what are the critical alternatives? What could have happened if this has not happened? What are the alternatives? Alternative one, person A has this automatic desire, I love you, he accepts it. The problem is solved there. He is not going to come to you with a problem. Person B, he has this desire, I love you. Guilt happens, but the guilt is very mild. So I hate you is also mild. It never goes to I will kill you. Sorry. So person B, he goes into I love you to I hate you, but the I hate you is very mild, nothing happens. Person C, I love you, guilt happens, I hate you happens, but his repressive ego strength is very high, he doesn't have to project. If he doesn't project on somebody, I will kill you, there's no question of paranoia. So the ego strength gives enough repressive capability, and therefore the paranoia does not happen. Now, all these alternatives have not happened in this case, and therefore the person is with you. Because the core desire is in many people. Everyone does not have schizophrenia. It is a one particular set of constellation which brings the person from this desire to schizophrenia. So these are what we call are the core event alternatives, that none of these alternatives has come to exist, and therefore the person is a patient. And this gives us an idea. Yes, please.
No, sir, please go ahead. I'll tell you after.
And this gives us an idea that what all is at work in the constellation around this core desire, around this core process, what all is working around it. For example, here the guilt is very harsh. Number one. Number two, the repressive strength is low. Therefore, the defense of projection has to be used because the defense of repression is not strong enough. And that is not strong enough because the ego strength is not strong enough. Okay. So this tells us that number one, the person does not have self-acceptance. Number two, the person has very harsh guilt. Number three, the person has weak ego strength and less repressive power. And number four, which is difficult to say, but okay, so I think these three we can deduce from this part. Yeah, you were saying something.
Your option could be the DSM declaring homosexuality as normal. So that helps to lessen the guilt.
Correct.
And punishment. So there was that documentary that psychiatrist who went by using mask and with a different identity in the APA meeting to claim that homosexuality was normal.
Correct.
Because he was really afraid that people will kill him.
True. And that is where the very interesting dynamic comes in, because this is related to two things, guilt and shame. Both superego functions are activated when you talk of homosexuality. So the guilt may be religious or based upon a community ideal, which is internalized by the person. And he genuinely himself believes it is not right. And shame is something which comes from the environment. And in management of the shame, what the medical establishment says, what the celebrities say, what the neighbors say, what is in the textbooks, all of that is very useful. And of course, there is a relation between guilt and shame, that very high shame will automatically produce some sort of high guilt. And the other also can be true at times. Very interesting element to this also can be, you can also have a person who accepts partly one's homosexuality, lives it out, and yet has this phenomena going on at the same time in a mild way. It's a very strange thing to say.
Yet has this phenomenon going on inside the mind.
Yeah, that the person has homosexual desire, he partly accepts it, he lives it out with homosexual partners, he even speaks it on television, He even speaks it on internet. I will not name the person, but he speaks it even on internet. And yet he goes to therapist and psychiatrist and still continues the medication because part of him still undergoes this process. So you can easily have a self-acceptance which is partial and an intense non-acceptance going on. And this can also turn if it's in a lighter way. For example, let us say, I will kill you and you will kill me are slightly lighter. One can easily become a religious fanatic.
I did not quite understand this.
Many religious preachers have this dynamic in a milder form. That they have unacceptable homosexual desires in the unconscious, because of which they have intense rage towards oneself and intense looking down upon oneself as somebody subhuman, somebody worse than animal. And the same are unbearable and projected outwards on another community. And then it becomes his lifelong mission to convert people from that community to his community or to annihilate the other.
True.
That's a classical jihadi preacher. Where a milder form of paranoia is in the unconscious mind, but it is not in the form of delusion, something much lesser than that, and that evokes a sense of agency, that there is a reaction to it, that I will kill them. Not literally, but I will attack them. I have ego strength enough to attack them.
Overvalued idea, perhaps?
Yeah, overvalued idea. And often it is unconscious. It will never come up for us to diagnose that as overvalued idea.
I understand.
Completely unconscious. So these are what I can call the core event alternatives, that neither of these alternatives happened. And therefore, the person is with you. Now that he is with you, there is no point of going into why this did not happen. I mean, sorry, I should not say that. There is point of going into it, but we know, okay, it does not happen, and therefore the person is with me. And this tells us certain things, that the core alternatives does not happen because, number one, self-acceptance low, guilt very high, repressive power low. Okay. So this is the first thing that we do. We analyze the core process, the core psychoanalytic dynamic further into the critical part and the non-critical part. And we isolate the critical part for even further analysis. So let us see what we do.
How can we help children to improve their repression?
This takes us...
If it is not out of the framework now, if you can address this now.
Yeah, so one way is gradual desensitization. Right? That what is difficult to contain inside, you slowly expose somebody. That's a more behavioral approach. Second is this whole idea of containment. Right? That is, one of the aspects of the repressive power, there are two aspects of it. One is, what is the force which can put down something? Meaning, what is the force that can put down an overflowing bucket? And second is how big the bucket is. So how big the bucket is a question of containment. And that is learned from somebody else almost unconsciously in therapy or in early life. And one can consciously also do it by behavioral practice. That allow the emotion to get up, get generated, but don't allow it to overwhelm you and make you do things, make you act out. So we can do it by a kind of a behavioral approach to the emotional generation and containment. The third aspect is the emptying out of the buckets. Because if the emptying out of the buckets happens by catharsis, there is more volume to contain.
Yeah.
The fourth is the analytical approach to how emotion is generated. So again, the bucket is not filled up. So one goes into how are you interpreting an event. For example, somebody humiliates me in public and I am angry for 2 days. And I then analyze myself, how am I responding to that person? And why everyone else is not responding the same way? What are the other responses possible that others are giving? How are they able to be perfectly fine in 3 hours? So when I start learning those more functional cognitive patterns, the new generation of emotion is less. And that also helps in keeping the buckets empty. And the direct practice of repression, where one allows the emotion to generate, one observes it, but one does not allow it to overwhelm you. And if there are deeper problems of internalization or attack by others, then they have to be solved by therapy. Therapy always increases the ego strength. Good therapy. Because one may never have seen in life a good, safe container, and he finds it in the therapist. And what he sees, he develops inside of him by internalizing. So these are all the ways of looking at ego strength, how to increase it. Right? Emptying the filled buckets, enhancing the size of buckets, not allowing buckets to get filled up again, practicing the emotions by observation and containment, developing a good container, as well as for internalizing a good, reliable, stable object. And developing I am good enough, fortified enough that when there is attack of you are not good enough, it is taken with a pinch of salt.
This gives me so many memories of so many instances where I was appreciated by my teachers, that Vasudev can take criticism well, that repression is strong,
Right.
that he doesn't have to retaliate immediately.
Correct.
I used to keep remaining disturbed for quite some time, which others did not know. But it gives me so many instances where I can remember myself and how did I sail through. That is
Correct.
very nice. That is very nice.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
So I was saying, we are far more than we believe. We are far more immoral, which we see in our dreams, what we fantasize. And
Yes.
we are far more moral when we see the guilt punishing us.
Mhm.
So we are far more than we believe on both the sides of the spectrum. And guilt is such a deep-seated, insidiously working variable that most people underestimate how moral we are in the unconscious sense. So what we do in HEAT is, we don't stop with the psychoanalytic dynamic. We go further into analysis of the psychoanalytic dynamic by dividing it into critical and non-critical parts, and look at, in the critical part, what is the most critical point? The most critical point is generation of guilt, which in turn leads to generation of hatred, rage, the desire to murder. But the core is the guilt. Higher the guilt, more will be the anger generated, more will be the hatred generated. So now let us take the step 2 to see how guilt as an emotion is manufactured inside. What are the variables involved in it? So step 1, we found out the psychoanalytic causal explanation. Step 2, we found out the critical event in that causal explanation. Step 3, we found out what is the core emotion generated in that critical event. And we see here the core emotion in the critical event is guilt. Now we are taking step 4. How did it get manufactured? What are the variables involved in manufacturing of this core emotion in such high proportions, which later on leads to the whole sequence of events, resulting in the disorder? So this is how we can look at the generation of the affect. So this is a classical heat thing. Now, the generation of the affect broadly has two parts to it, the stimulus and the constitution. Right? Let us say the stimulus is very high. Like, let us take the example of generation of humiliation and sadness and anger for a philosopher Spinoza. When Spinoza wrote his philosophy, it was in contradiction with Christianity to great extent. And he was part of a Jewish group residing in largely Christian country. And therefore, they asked him to modify it. He refused. And the punishment at that point was that anybody who refuses to listen to the community council, the punishment for him is in two parts. One, he will be excommunicated from the group. And two, before he is excommunicated, he will be asked to lie down and everyone will walk over him. And this is what he faced. Now here, the stimulus itself is so high that regardless of the constitution, huge amount of affect will be generated. So you don't have to be a sensitive person to generate voluminous affect. The stimulus itself is so powerful. Like, let us say, some boss calls everybody in the office and humiliates you in front of everybody. The stimulus itself is very strong. Right? Let us say somebody loses all family members in an accident and himself is left alive. He is going to generate huge amount of sadness because the stimulus is such. So when we talk of affect generation, the first element is stimulus. If the stimulus is very strong, it does not matter what your constitution is, everybody is going to generate voluminous affect. But if the stimulus is weak and yet you generate very voluminous affect, it means something to do with the constitution, how you respond to the stimulus, how you interpret that stimulus. That your evaluation of the stimulus is the more problem than the stimulus strength itself. So when we talk of affect generation, here the affect we are talking about is guilt. That guilt is the core affect. And why high amount of guilt is generated? Either because of stimulus or because of constitution. In this particular case, the stimulus is not very strong. It is not that some man is doing a cabaret to seduce this person. He has just looked at somebody and this whole thing has happened. Maybe he has looked at the person repeatedly, but the stimulus is, if you talk of low, medium, and high intensity, it is low in intensity. And if I divide low further into L1, L2, L3, let us say it is of L1. So stimulus and the constitution. Now, what is the constitution? If you go further, it is the affective evaluation of the stimulus. If he sees a handsome man in front of him, how does he evaluate that stimulus? And there, this thing comes in. That there is a cognitive interpretation of that stimulus and there is an affective interpretation of that stimulus. What is the cognitive interpretation? So this is the cognitive interpretation, and this is the affective interpretation, affective variables. So let me go into the cognitive part first. Okay, how a handsome man comes in front of him and this patient is there. Now what happens? Stimulus is coming from that man and it is getting cognitively first understood and then affect is generated. So here I have to bring in Immanuel Kant's model of knowing anything. He talks about a movement from stimulus to sensation, meaning like if there's a phone, the optical things fall on me, I have a tactile input from my skin, it may even give an audio signal. And all those signals coming from one object, right? The stimulus falls on my nerves and they get converted into something that I can process, which is sensation. So stimulus comes from the object and whatever part of the stimulus I can process, that converts into sensation. Maybe we are not able to process every stimulus. In the light spectrum or the sound spectrum, a range of stimuli we cannot process, so they will never convert into sensation. So a range of stimuli that we can process converts into sensation. And then the mind somehow coordinates that the tactile sensation, the visual and the auditory related to one object are grouped together and another object are grouped together. There's a coordinator who is grouping, like the optical stimulus of this and the tactile stimulus of this, they don't confuse with each other. So there's somebody who is coordinating all stimuli coming from one object as belonging to that object and bringing them together so that I can have a perception of this, which is called perception, which is very different from the definition of perception used in psychiatry. So when we say perception impaired,
I did not find any difference. Perception is attribution of meaning to the sensation, for which your brain has to work, combine, and so many stimuli, sensations together, compare with the past experience, and then attribute meaning to it. Otherwise, it's not perception. Otherwise, it is just used lightly in psychiatry.
Correct.
I would say that.
Yeah. So what you said, the later part, that in Immanuel Kant comes in conception, knowledge, and wisdom.
I see.
In Kant's way, perception is just an identification of this thing. And that is where the psychiatric word in MSc, the way perception is used and the way Immanuel Kant uses it are different. So sensations are grouped together to create a perception in space and time. So what perception does is, the process of perception involves mind applying the categories of space and time upon the sensations put together. Then all sensations relating to an object are grouped together and the concepts of space and time are applied to it, resulting in perception, which results in recognition of a distinct object in space and time. So perception is essentially a cognitive activity involving application of the concepts of space and time upon coordinated sensations, resulting in identification. Thereafter, the perception is further processed and the concepts of cause and effect are applied in conception. So everything related to cause and effect is applied in the stage of conception. And then it is further processed in a context of information and using imagination and predictive capabilities to generate knowledge. And then knowledge is turned into wisdom. So it starts with stimulus and ends with wisdom. Obviously, if something is ending with wisdom, the person will not have a disorder. So when we are talking of applying Immanuel Kant's model to disorders, by and large, we'll stop with knowledge. And you will also have very rarely a problem at the stage of sensation or perception. You can have a problem in the stage of sensation when you have a hysterical non-cognizance of sensation, like loss of hearing or something of that sort. Then the stimulus is incident, but the sensation is not happening, or perception is not happening. So they will be very deep-rooted psychomotor problems or hysterical problems. But usually, our problems will be at the level of conception and knowledge. So 80% of when we apply this to DSM, it will be conception or knowledge, and mostly it will be knowledge. Then the whole fantasy has come in. So in conception or knowledge, it will be problematic. Now, this is related to an outside object. Now, in this case, when the cognitive functioning is happening because of something internal, right, then we are looking at conception and knowledge as the core areas where the processing is happening. And the problem here is in the area of knowledge, that one recognizes one's homosexual desire. And then what happens? All the knowledge of right and wrong bears upon it. And the knowledge of right and wrong creates this guilt. So it is at the level of knowledge that the problem is really situated, cognitively speaking. So it ends with cognitive analysis of the desire, saying that the desire is extremely wrong to have. It's extremely immoral to have. And that leads to first that how wrong it is. Is it mildly wrong, moderately wrong, or severely wrong? And the analysis is it's severely wrong. So on a 10-point scale, if I say it is at 8, it is wrong at 8 out of 10. So that is what the cognitive analysis is. How wrong it is, it's very, very wrong. It is not mildly wrong. It is not moderately wrong. It's very, very wrong. And the moment you say it's very, very wrong, then what effect should be generated in response to something very, very wrong? Guilt. So if it is mildly wrong, then probability is the guilt will also generated will also be mild. But if it is severely wrong, guilt generated also will likely to be severe. But there is another element which is involved in manufacturing of guilt. That is, after the cognitive analysis, there is something called sensitivity of the individual. That if something is uniquely wrong, out of 10, if something is wrong at 0.1, how much guilt should I generate? So whatever guilt I generate at 1 out of 10, I will multiply by 7 if it is severely wrong at 7. So how much affect you generate in response to a unit cognition for generating that affect, that is sensitivity. So for a unit event, how much affect should be generated? And then how many units are there in your own cognition? So your sensitivity multiplied by 7. Right? And then corresponding to that, this is the heat concept. I will not go into it. Affinity will be deposited on the chakra and life energy will be diverted to it. And that will result in affect generated. And that is how the volume of guilt will be generated. Now, once this volume is generated, part of it will be expressed, can be expressed, not necessarily will be, but can be. Part of it can be processed in other ways. Part of it will be repressed. And when nothing can be done, excess pathological affect remains unprocessed, undefended against. and that will result in symptom formation. Which means if here in cognition somebody changes his mind to say that there's nothing wrong in this, there's no question of guilt generation. So when we say we are working on self-acceptance, what we are working on is this knowledge. And then if the sensitivity is high or sensitivity is low, even if this is high, the total guilt will not be very high because sensitivity is. So this is the affective part of manufacturing the affect. And this is the cognitive part of affect manufacturing. So then affect is generated, and once affect is generated, part of it can be expressed. In this case, it's not expressed, completely repressed. It can be processed in other ways. Somebody can let out certain things by sublimation, by expression in arts, by talking to people. Nothing, but that small amount, large can be repressed as far as the ego strength permits. And when certain excess affect remains, which neither of this can consume, that excess affect will go into symptom formation and it will create rage and then paranoia. It will result in excessive guilt, and that guilt will create rage and paranoia. So it will result in.
Is it okay to say that along with the psychological symptom formation, there can be somatic symptom formation also if the defense of somatization comes in between?
Absolutely.
Symbolization, displacement.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Then I experience pain in my neck or my stomach or
correct.
Psych.
Correct. Let us say you have a person with schizophrenia and psoriasis.
Mm-hmm.
So what has happened is part of the rage has gone into creating schizophrenia, and part of the rage has gone on the skin to create psoriasis.
Seeing one such patient now. He doesn't have frank schizophrenia, but has psoriasis, which gets well when he's following up regularly in the KM hospital. I'm seeing that patient, and he gives music and creates aims to create albums.
Correct. So psoriasis is predominantly believed to be expression of anger on skin.
Mm.
In fact, Melanie Klein has written a paper on this.
Mm.
The use of skin as an object of anger. Aggression, I think she used the word aggression as an object of aggression. Similarly, you can have use of skin as an object of sadness when lot of mucus secretions come out of skin. And you can have use of skin as object of anxiety when the skin goes extremely dry. So anxiety somatized will lead to dryness. Sadness somatized will lead to mucus formation or some secretion. Essentially, you are crying with that skin. And rage will lead to destruction and redness and inflammation. So whenever we have anything which involves redness, inflammation, destruction, or burning, it is somatization of rage. Whenever we have secretions of mucus type or any watery type, it's the somatization of sadness. You are crying with that object. And whenever there is extreme dryness, it is somatization of anxiety.
Fantastic.
And in Ayurveda, you will call it anxiety, you will call it Vata problems. Vata creates dryness. So anxiety somatized will lead to Vata problems, which will lead to dryness issues. Anger somatized will lead to Pitta problems, which will involve redness, inflammation, burning, destruction. And sadness somatized will lead to cough problems, which will involve mucus secretion or any watery secretion. Essentially, you are crying with that organ. So that is how we can connect psychoanalysis with Ayurveda and then to range of symptoms. So this is another heat invention. How do you go into manufacturing of affect in conceptual terms? So nothing of this is empirical. That will take a long time. But before that, let us first be conceptually clear about it. So this symptom formation may be only psychological plus somatic, or only somatic. All the three are possible. Like in many cases of diabetes, it is just the aggression which is put onto the pancreas, often through the immune system, because immune system is almost like a nodal junction for receiving the affect and dispatching the affect. It receives various affects from the mind and then dispatches to different organs and different functions on which to act. So the immune system almost is like a nodal junction for this transfer of affect from the mind to the body.
In psychosomatics, they said there are receptors on lymphocytes for Librium or chloride hydroxide. That is the.
Correct.
So they said lymphocytes are circulating pieces of brain.
Correct. Very correct.
And various immune mediators are there,
right,
which I am not very conversant with them, but cytokines and leukotrienes, their levels, they get modified during the disease states, and with the treatment also they revert back.
correct. And Melanie Klein says the core for having a good immune system from a psychological standpoint is there will be other biological factors also, like the early mother's milk and early nutrition and so on. But from a psychological standpoint, the internalization of a good, reliable, stable object.
कोणाकडून काय घ्यायचं ते कळलं की झालं.
Correct. Correct. And that's very precious.
Yeah.
I knew of somebody whose asthma got cured, not relieved, cured forever. And the person has not had it for the last 15 years.
Wow.
And before that, the person had it for 10 years.
Wow.
Right? And that was after one good relationship.
Chha.
And she told me, ki one good relationship and it will be off.
In old textbooks, old editions of our textbooks, they said one good relationship and you will not become schizophrenic.
Correct. That will be true for many psychological issues, because the good, reliable, stable object will be internalized and catharsis will happen in some way in a good relationship. It may not be the hydraulic kind of catharsis. It may be the ungeneration of affect, which we talked about before. It will happen. Should we break for a cup of tea?
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
this is what I was saying. This is the heat take on how affect is generated. And we say any affect can be generated. For example, guilt, sadness, anger. But if we go deeper, how the affect is generated? So there is a stimulus and there is a response from the constitution. Now, instead of stopping at the word constitution, we go into the deconstruction of response. Okay, what variables are involved in responding or in constituting the constitution, so to say? Otherwise, when we use the word constitution, it is just cover up for I don't know. Like we say something is genetic, it's just a good way of saying I don't know. It's replacing one unknown by another unknown. Like if you ask somebody that you're saying it's genetic, tell me which gene is responsible and in what way.
It will be soon.
But
not to me, I'm not that that intelligent, but
Correct.
it will be possible.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is at present, the word constitution or genetic causation is replacing one unknown by another.
I understand.
But if
Agree.
we don't want constitution to be an unknown, if we want
Yeah.
to deconstruct it, then this is one way of deconstructing it.
Mm.
To go into the cognitive part and the affective part of generation of an affect.
Mm.
So when we see mild, moderate, or severe affect being generated, this can be the, and we can look at what is high or what is low. Like here, one can put intensity, high, low, medium, or we can divide low again into L1, L2, L3. So we can have 9 grades, L1, L2, M3, M1, M2, M3, H1, H2, H3, and we can put here. And it can
Yes.
give us some idea about, in a more elemental sense, what is going wrong in the person. This is like we are going more and more deeper and deeper, more and more elemental. From macro, we are going more and more micro. We are still not at the molecular level, atomic level, anything of that sort. We are still conceptually speaking, we are not in the empirical area. But it's a long way to go. So we are taking the first step of conceptualizing.
I often like this analogy that we are going from one end, uh, boring a tunnel, and if biomedical is going from the other end, and we
Correct.
will meet.
Correct.
Possible, yeah.
We hope we are in the same tunnel.
Sir, yes,
We don't need to parallel tunnels.
blindly.
Yeah. Uh, so, uh, so this is how we can look at it. So again, just to revise, we start with the Freudian dynamic, divide into critical, non-critical, look at what is the core affect in the critical part, go into generation of that affect, and this is the table of affect generation, how you can go conceptually speaking into the cognitive and affective part of affect generation and see how affect generated once is differently processed and what cannot be processed remains as excess pathological affect, which goes into symptom formation, which may be completely psychological, completely biological, or both. So here we are talking about guilt generation. Similarly, we can talk about any other affect generation.
धनुष्याला बाण लावलाय कुठे मारू सांग आता मी तो परत नाही भात्यात टाकणार वेर शॅल आय एक्सप्रेस माय अफेक्ट सर थँक्यू सो मच व्हेरी रिव्हिलिंग
We'll continue it after the cup of tea.
ब्रेक
So till now what we have done is we have deepened, we have done two things. One, we have done a deeper analysis of the psychoanalytic dynamic, number one. Number two, we have brought in Immanuel Kant's model, which is like bringing epistemology from philosophy into psychoanalysis. These two things we have done till now. And by doing these two things, we see so many things have opened up before us in terms of causality and in terms of focus. For example, if we see that repression is a problem, we can focus on that along with acceptance in therapy. If we see affect expressed is a problem, we can focus on that. If we see knowledge is a problem, we can focus on that. Wherever we see the problem is high, we focus upon those things in therapy. So we are able to do it in a more elemental, more fundamental level. Now let us look. So we have already done what we accomplished till now. One, deeper analysis compared to regular psychoanalysis. Two, analysis at a more elemental level. And three, bringing in epistemology into psychoanalysis. Now, let us look at the other part. How do you bring in East into this? The Hindu philosophy, Hindu psychology into this. So let us go back. We had there the concept of the core event alternatives. And we said there were many alternatives which were possible, which possibly would have been healthier, which did not occur, but this thing occurred because of which the patient is before you as a patient. So this brings us to the question, why did this event happen and not the other events? Why did the critical event happen and the critical event alternatives did not happen? So that leads us to Eastern way of looking at things, which is called the general causality factors of any event. In the East, in Hindu psychology, Hindu philosophy, Hindu spirituality, we often ask this question, why does any event happen at all? What can be a comprehensive list of factors for occurrence of any event? And then we come to the specific event, that this pathological event in the mind is one of the many events. So the general formula of events with some modification has to be applied to this or can be applied to this. So we take up the question that why did the critical event happen and alternatives to the critical event did not happen. So when we go deeper into why did the critical event happen from an Eastern point of view, specifically the Hindu spiritual point of view, we get a model which I call the general causality model. So let us apply that to this critical event to understand from an Eastern standpoint, why did this event occur? So this is the general causality model, that any event can happen because of any of this or a combination of this. Like, I have a desire to drink water, I will drink water right now. This event is an event of my free will. Government makes it compulsory for everyone to get vaccinated. It happens. It is not my free will, it is the free will of somebody else. So event can happen because of others' free will. When water, in the rainy season, when the water falls down, once it falls down, it starts moving on a slope downwards. That is because of a law of nature. Nobody is doing it. Neither my free will nor somebody else's free will. It is just the law of nature at work. So some events happen just because of law of nature. No free will is involved. Some free will can happen because of karma of oneself. And from here, the belief part begins. 1, 2, and 3 can be accepted within the Western paradigm. 4th onwards is completely East. It is not the West. It will not fit in the framework of modernity, in the framework of hard science as we call it. So, but we are here into the East, so we can go into it. So karma of the self, like my own accident, I believe, is a karmic event. That it was my own repayment for my own accumulated karma. Maybe of this life or past life, or all put together. But it's a heavy EMI of the karmic loan. And that is happening because of karma of myself. Some events can happen because of karma of others. Like there is an innocent person who is, let us say, in Syria today, a boy of 7 years of age, but because of what his parents have done to parents of somebody else, he will reap the fruits of it. So events will happen because of karma of others. Some events will happen because of journey of oneself, that one has a program of life and certain experience have to be had, and because of it those events will happen. Some events can happen because of journey of the universe, journey of others. I think it's not written here, it's missing. That the journey of somebody needs some events to happen, and therefore it happens somehow. You are either a spectator or a participant or a consequence taker of that event. Some events happen because of journey of the universe, meaning we believe in the spiritual domain that, let us say, somebody comes up with an innovation which can rapidly change the world, but the journey of the universe is slower, and therefore despite the brilliance he will never get a chance to be popular in his day. Let's take the example of Soren Kierkegaard. He used to always say, only the day after tomorrow belongs to me.
When?
Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. Yeah. He used to always say, only the day after tomorrow belongs to me. And that came out to be true. Now that can be one's own karma, or it can be the journey of the universe. And therefore, this journey of the universe concept explains retrocausation. That something destined in the future will not allow something to happen in the present. So that is retrocausation in parapsychology, that something can backward cause something. So that will be the journey of the universe. Some events will happen because of chance, because of accidents. Some events will happen because of suprahuman forces and beings, which again is difficult to accept within the Western paradigm. Then there is this idea of the core principle of the universe, and the core principle may change its course slightly in the process of unfolding, and that is, it creates new karma. Or it can happen because of freedom of reality or freedom of God or whatever you call it. So the whole idea in the East is that this is the way, essential way, not a comprehensive way. It's not specific, it's essential, generic. It's a generic model of why any event happens. Now, when we turn this any event into a pathogenesis event, some of these go away. That if we ask that the critical event which happened in the schizophrenic patient is also an event, and we ask, why did that event happen? Because there was a possibility of alternatives also happening. So that event happened because of some of these factors. So if we look here, in case of the specific person, 12, 11 are completely out, 9 is completely out, 8 is completely out, 7 can be there. Maybe his family members have to suffer a schizophrenic person in the house. Or maybe it's their karma. But 1 is out, partly in. 2 is partly in, partly out. So these two are mildly involved. Sorry, first is moderately involved, second is mildly involved, third, of course, is always involved. Nothing happens beyond the laws of nature. This also is moderately involved or maybe heavily involved. This 5 will be moderately involved. This may not be involved at all, but somehow we will get an idea of why that event is happening given the case history. And part of it is very intuitive and based upon your own knowledge in the parapsychological or spiritual area or your development of intuition. So when we go back, here it is written general causality factors. They will be affecting the constitution. So if you say, why is the constitution what it is? Why is this perception or conception happening only in a particular way and not other? You can partly say this and come to this and say this is 1, 2, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 are involved. One can say this. And in general, when we look at this whole evaluation of the stimulus, 3 things are very important: positivity, negativity, and hope. They color the way you interpret this. So they are involved in the knowledge part of it and the conception part of it. In these 2 things, they are involved. These 3 elementals are involved. So this is how we go forward and bring the Eastern part here. Now, why do we bring this? Because each of this, the factors has a different remedy. Yeah.
Here there is a shloka from Gita, Bhagavad Gita, which summarizes 5 factors.
Correct.
Adhishthanam tatha karta, karanam cha pruthak vidha, vividha cha pruthak cheshta, daivam chaivatra panchamam.
So if you further detail it, it will be 12.
I see. Yeah.
And if you further detail this, you can easily go to 24 or 25.
And what is meant by prapancha? Is prapancha somewhere involved in this system?
Yes.
What are the 5 things in prapancha involved? I have not come across that. Or Sankhya, Shaiva. Are they relevant or will not?
The word prapancha is very differently interpreted across the schools. Because those which are focused inwards will look at prapancha, which is involved in the functioning of the chakras, which will be the inner manifestation of Maya. And those who are more outwardly involved, they will look at prapancha in the outer world, the outer manifestation of Maya. So one will go into the motivation and second will go into the alluring object. And the prapancha will work both ways. And another way of looking at prapancha is, some people will, very Puritan people will equate it to desire itself. And some will equate it to the more manipulative form of desire. Some will equate it to a kind of a trapping, scheming thing, that you are trapped by a prapancha. So it will be based upon what school in the East we are looking at to understand prapancha, how it is used. But a generic definition of that will be, anything that entangles you with Maya is prapancha. And anything that releases you from Maya into enlightenment is a cessation of prapancha. So that is a generic definition of it, but one will go into the good desire as not being prapancha and the not good desire as being prapancha. So that is a very different, a plural way of looking at the word prapancha. If you look at here, the karma of the self, the karma of others, they will involve a lot of prapancha. The journey of self also will be involving a lot of prapancha, because this journey does not necessarily mean that you are here to experience only the good things and the sattvic things. The self journey also involves experience of the rajas and the tamas. And therefore, even there, the prapancha which can entangle you also is there.
And there are only 4 of these are italicized.
Yeah.
I notice.
Correct. So most probably they will be these 4. they will be most common in most disorders. Because the process is happening completely unconsciously, unless the person has knowledge, the free will does not much come into the picture from a psychoanalytic standpoint. Now, what the person knows, analyzes, and is not able to overcome, there the free will come in. So, say addiction, somebody is trying very hard to give up and he does not take any substance, and then a friend comes and forces him to take or cajoles him to take, that is the free will of others. Right? So, the most common will be that 3, 4, 5, 6 will be the most common across disorders. And others will come in. So there will be some combination out of this. And 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 will be the most rare. Eight, 9, 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 will be most rare that somebody has a disorder because of this. So this is how the general causality model can be brought to bear upon the critical event's occurrence. The critical event is taken as this event. And the benefit of this model is each reason has a different remedy. Like the first one is more a subject of cognitive analysis. The second one more is a question of managing interpersonal relationships. Third is more of knowing the laws of nature and harmonizing one with it. Fourth is more of recognizing one's karma and doing reality acceptance of it. Fifth is knowing of others and protecting oneself from it. Sixth is accepting one's journey as authentic and embrace it with courage. Seventh is acceptance of others' program of life. Eighth is accepting that one is not moving forward as much as one should because of some non-human factor, and we are doing reality acceptance of that. Similarly, we have below, and each of them, like number 10, will get into occult. Karma of the self will go into occult. Karma of others will go into occult. So in pranic healing, there will be some remedies. In Tantra, there will be some remedies for 4, 5, and 10. So different causal elements of the event will be dealt with by different remedies, and therefore you can create a holistic basket. Then what we do is we describe the core process in terms of the Eastern model of the mind, which is HIT model of the mind is a combination of East and West. So in that context of that model, we define it. For example, the homosexual desire arises in the Swadhisthana center and is opposed by guilt of the deeper heart center, which gives rise to anger in the Muladhara chakra, which is then projected out, resulting in the delusion of paranoia. So when we translate this phenomena, the Freudian phenomena in terms of the chakra anatomy, the psychological anatomy in terms of chakra, because the tantric conception of the human mind is in terms of chakra. So the chakras and the nadis, they are like the psychological anatomy. So if we translate this phenomena in those terms, where different effects are processed in different chakras, then we will come to this description of the same phenomena. This is nothing but the Freudian phenomena articulated in the Eastern language of Tantra. That a homosexual desire arises in the Swadhisthana center, opposed by guilt in the deeper heart center, which in turn gives rise in the Muladhara, projected out to create the paranoia. And here, the healing will be from a very different perspective. The healing will be clean the chakras. Which chakras are involved? the Swadhisthana has to be cleaned. So the bottom two chakras and the heart chakra have to be cleaned and energized. So if the same person goes to a pranic healer or a crystal healer or a Reiki healer, this is what he will do. He will first say which chakras are involved in this pathology and how do I clean and energize those chakras. And if he does that and within a few minutes the chakras are again filled up, then he will surmise that I have just cleaned the chakra. It has again filled up after 20 minutes. It means from behind the chakra, the karmic layer is pushing things forward. And therefore now I have to go to the karmic layer. So this is how he will analyze it. That when you clean the chakra and it's filled up again, so behind the chakra is the emotional layer, behind that is the thought layer, behind that is the karmic layer. And any layer from behind can fill up the layer in the front. So when you clear a layer, it's again filled up. In our language, we will call relapse. But again, it is filled up, which means something from behind is pushing it forward, even when you clean the top surface of it. So the pranic healer will first try with the energy body, then go to the emotional body, then go to the thought body, then go to the karmic body. So they will look at it in a very different way. Now, what happens when you do this? You get a basket of tools to heal the chakras, because the same thing, like for example, in this case, the anger is generated in the Muladhara chakra and you want to heal that chakra. You don't want so much anger to be generated, because if it is generated, it will get projected out, giving the paranoia. So how do you heal that chakra? There are various methods. The pranic healer will go into cleaning and energizing. The yoga will have particular yoga, particular pranayam, particular bandha for each chakra. The mantra will have a different kind of thing. They will start with the deity of the chakra, Ganesha, and they will start with the Ganesh mantra. And then go to the sexual center and find who is the devata, what is the yantra, and what is the mantra for that chakra. Homeopathy will go in a very different way, addressing the same thing. Crystal healing will go in a different way. Some form of Ayurveda using herbal substance will go in a very different way. And some like Tantra who very deeply use idol therapy. The idol worship actually is a very deep form of idol therapy. They will go in a very different way. They will essentially focus on what we said a few moments ago. One good relationship. So they will have one good relationship with the idol. So first they will see the idol, then they will give a name to it, then there will be a stories related to it that will create a personality in the mind of the person. And then, so like you will first see the form of Ganesha. Then somebody will say this is called Ganesha, give a name to it. Then there will be stories related to Ganesha. And then he will have a personality in his mind. Of course, an anthropomorphic thing, but still a personality. And then he will relate to it. And the relation will go through steps. So there will be parichay, introduction, acquaintance, parichay, and then there will be a regular relationship, sambandh. So the parichay, sambandh, when the sambandh gets very, very intense, it gets into a state which is called tadrupta. That you are thinking about it all the time. And then tanmayata, you are obsessed with it. And then lay, the identification happens, the internalization happens. So they will go in a very different way of doing it. But all these tools will open up if we open up the thinking about causality. And then we describe the same causal phenomena in terms of the entire heat model, which we'll do later. It's too complicated at this stage. But this is how we can bring in one more Eastern element into the analysis. And from this, what comes up is this whole holistic healing sheet. Okay, where is the problem located? Is it located in the physical body, in the physiology or neurochemistry? If so, then the best way out is allopathy or Ayurveda. In some cases, it may be martial arts also. If the problem is strongly rooted in energy body, then pranic healing, Reiki, acupressure, Tai Chi, they might be better solutions. If the problem is emotionally rooted, like in our case, it's rooted in guilt, psychoanalysis or emotion-centered therapy may be better. If it is more a thought problem, a knowledge problem, like when you tell somebody there's nothing to fear, nothing to feel wrong about homosexuality, and he's convinced, you are treating him more with a cognitive therapy at the level of thought. Then CT, REBT, DBT, they are far better in effect. When somebody has a masculinity femininity problem, then these Eastern ways are far conducive. Karmic, these are the schools, and self-journey, these are the schools. Now, wherever the problem is rooted, corresponding to that, based upon the person, we can pick and choose from the choices we have. Because in every area we have choices, and create a holistic healing basket for that person. And very important is, what do you pick up from each area and how do you sequence it? The sequencing is also very important. Like when do you stop one and when do you start the other? Or do you put the two in combination? So that is where the details of holistic healing come out.
In the last column, everything was the same.
Yeah.
Holistic healing package, person, problem, contextual, person, problem, contextual. Why is it that?
Because it all depends upon personality, pathology, intensity, and his response to various things
Context.
that you want to apply to him. Like everyone may not be a candidate for ISTDP. Everyone may not be a candidate for psychoanalysis. So let us say you are here. You know the problem is primarily rooted in the emotions. And you have these choices. Now, what do you do here? Some people will be very receptive to psychoanalysis. Some will be only in workshops. Like there are many Osho followers who will attend many workshops to cleanse the emotions, but they will not come for psychoanalysis. They just don't want it. They don't like it. So it's very, very contextual to the person and to the problem and the intensity of it.
And what are EDT and AUM? EDT.
It's emotional dialectic therapy.
Dialectic. And AUM is
the workshop offered by Human University, awareness, understanding, meditation. It's a group therapy workshop. They don't call it therapy. It's a group workshop, so to say.
Which university you said, sir?
Human University. There is a university in Netherlands called Human University, which is founded by mostly ex-Osho disciples. And it's a university dedicated only to personal growth. And they create the self-discovery, self-healing tools, one of which is AUM. And they conduct a very intense 2 weeks AUM at their place, where for 2 weeks, you live in a timeless environment, only doing catharsis. The watch, everything is taken away. It's a very comfortable environment, very air conditioned and everything. Everything is provided for, but the group guide makes sure that you focus only and only on catharsis. So it's 15 days of continuous catharsis, as much as you can do. And that opens up people because it's done in a group. You don't feel ashamed of doing it in front of anyone else later. And that's a very important part. Many people find it difficult to get emotional in presence of anybody else, including the therapist.
Yes.
So they offer this, and they also certify experts who in turn can then conduct AUM workshops. But the AUM workshops are concise forms of the original one. The concise form is a 2.5 hour thing where they devote 10 to 15 minutes to each emotion, like 10 to 15 minutes to anger, another 15 minutes to happiness, another 15 minutes to sadness, and so on and so forth. They call it closing and opening of the windows of a particular emotion. So you can do it again and again. I have done it about 9 times.
Public. What is the full form you said? AUN?
Awareness, understanding, meditation.
Awareness, understanding.
So it's 2.5 hours where you open and close the window of one by one successive affects. So it is designed by an ex-disciple of Osho called Viresh. And Viresh designed this AUM. It's a very good thing. It's a group therapy kind of workshop. But what happens is I have seen it reaches a plateau. The gains of the workshop are not linear. It is not that every time you do, you cleanse yourself by 20%. After some time, it reaches a plateau, and that is where you have reached the area of high resistance, which it is not able to break through. It meaning you are not able to break through in that setting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Must be protective also. In Amsterdam or in Rotterdam?
Amsterdam, I think.
Amsterdam.
So this is how I wanted to introduce the heat model. It is holistic, it is elemental in analysis, and it allows you to analyze it deeper than classical psychoanalysis, allows you to bring in epistemology, allows you to bring in the Eastern Hindu spirituality, Hindi philosophy, and opens up a way for this kind of a holistic healing basket creation, individualized, customized to a person. So my feeling is as a framework to start off, it is a good framework. Over years, it will undergo development, modification, everything.
Yes.
It's a good place to start with.
Yes, sir.
So only thing we have not discussed is the philosophy of heat and the model of the mind of heat, which some other time we will take it.
Positively.
Questions that we have?
Thank you. Wonderful.
Okay. See you then.